I was very lucky because I got introduced to the guy who sorts my guitars out. Mark Pressling, and I got introduced because he used to do Seafood's guitar. So our friends used to be in a band called Seafood, and I literally got put onto him in my 20s, and it was when I just got my Fender Bullet, and I was looking to get it customized, and so I ended up going and seeing him because he was in Southall, which was just up the road from where I lived, and it's super cool. He's just. I think he was working for Fender at the time, but he basically at the bottom of his garden, he's just got his guitar shed, and it's so wonderful when you walk into it. It's almost like I can imagine. I feel like that's what a kid must feel like when they go to a grotto and they're happy seeing Santa Claus. But like as soon as you open the door, it just smells of glue. It's just really wonderful. It's just got that wood and glue kind of smell in there. And he's super cool. Like all of his tools come out, like I remember the first time we were talking about what strings I play, and and then embarrassingly I was like, and I was just trying to remember which gauge strings I had, and before I said anything, he pulled out this kind of like little kind of haberdasher's kind of spring-loaded thing, and he pulled out a gauge, and then stuck it on my strings, and he just screwed something in, and then he was like, "Oh, you play a 9 gauge," and he kind of worked it out before I was scratching around. But he's just a bit of a magician like that. He knows his stuff, and then I kind of I remember giving him the Bullet and explaining what I wanted to do with it, and I didn't really, I still don't know much about the kind of intricacies of kind of guitar hardware,
or how to play it.
Or any hardware, or how to play it. Thanks, Greg. And so I ended up just kind of trusting him. I was like, I just wanted it to sound rock. And then we talked about humbuckers, and it was like, yeah, I think I want to do that. Then he was saying, well, we could split the humbuckers, have a 5-way switch, and then use the single coils in each of them. And I was like, just do what you think. And then he was the one who kind of went, I think. Because that was the thing. It was really beautiful. It was watching someone with a passion, but then watching someone with a flair for what made a good guitar. Because he was like, "Yeah, we'll go humbuckers," and then he was the one who suggested, "Let's go. We'll go to Seymour Duncan's," and I can't even remember which model they were. He's going, "But let's make it silver." I was like, "Yeah, silver sounds nice," like because he's getting hardware, and that was it. So he just basically decided for me that was a silver look. And then he changed he literally ripped out all the electronics in it, replumbed it, stuck all the silver hardware on, and then gave me my 2 silver. And then obviously because with a Bullet, you've got that metal scratch plate. So that's how the bridge works. It's just a scratch plate that pulls round. And it's pretty ropey. It's quite a difficult thing when a guitar's not very stable when it's reliant on just like a static bridge, right? So, but he's just made it good. Like it's like each one of the little kind of, I don't even know the words from the nuts at the bottom where the strings kind of go off. They're all tunable, and you can set the intonation.
And the saddles.
Saddles, that's it. Wow. So he's just really set the saddles nicely on the metal plate, and they just work and they glide and they move. So you can tune that thing, and you can set the intonation, and it's all wonderful. It plays. But then he plucked all of the frets out, refretted the whole thing. And I remember when he unveiled it for me, because it was literally like, give me a couple of weeks, and then I went back to his little shed, and then he just kind of had it on the bar, and I was just like, whoa, I think I'm going to fall in love with this thing. That was the feeling. I felt like I had this new love in my life. I was like, yeah. And I did. I felt, I don't give a shit about any of my material possessions apart from my guitar. That's the one thing I actually genuinely have a love, I care about. But it's really wonderful how I've kind of, because I've noticed I've had it probably about, I think maybe done that 16, 17 years ago, but like I've weathered it in. When you weather an instrument in yourself,
yeah,
that's when it really starts to feel like your glove, doesn't it? It's a very different feeling to. There's something wonderful about something new when you're playing something new, but when your hands gone into shaping your instrument, it becomes a very mystical thing, and I'm sure other people who aren't musicians would think that was silly.
I think that's the sad thing about being a drummer, because you have to have loads of different parts. You can't become attached to a drumstick because you break it. You can't become attached to
the drum key.
A drum kit because
drum key.
the key. Well, maybe, yeah. I do have a drum key I've had actually for probably 20 years. I would be sad if I lost it.
That is important.
So maybe that's a very good point there, Dali. But I do think I can't really become like, I love a few parts of my drum kits, but I wouldn't hesitate in playing a different drum or snare drum or whatever, because as well it does, you only feel your drumsticks, or you can feel the sound obviously with the drums because you feel the reverberations, but you don't get that connection, I don't think, the same way a guitarist does with their guitar.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
When do you feel good on the drums? What's going on when you're feeling good?
When you can play them without someone telling you to play them differently. Like completely uninhabited. Just like if you want to play softly, cool, whatever. I usually play loudly, but that's not because I'm hitting them as loudly, as hard as I can possibly physically do. It's more because the way I play, with plenty of rim shots and also like I pulled my hand away quite quickly, so you get a lot of reverberation from the drum. I like to think that I can get a good sound out of a shit drum kit because of the way I play, and that's through practicing on being a lefty and playing loads of other people's kits and whatever. But yeah, that's probably when I'm not told to be quiet and when everything just sounds good. You go in some rehearsal rooms and you're like, fucking hell, that was so easy, because the rehearsal room sounds great. You're not getting loads of boom in the bass or like a railway noise. I don't know. There's all these kinds of things, aren't there? But yeah, when, I don't know. You guys must feel exactly the same way with getting a good tone, when you have to borrow an amp or you forget a pedal or whatever might happen, and you just plug in and you're like, this amp or whatever it might be, or the room often has a big bearing on it, but you just give it a bit of welly and you're like, you just back off and you're like, yeah, sweet, I've got the tone already. And then usually someone else in the band's having a shit time. But you're like, well, I've got a really great tone, so yeah.
Well,
I feel really sorry for you.
That is the thing about rehearsal rooms, like you never have the same experience. I don't think you have the same experience in the same rehearsal room either.
True, yeah. And plus it's all about mental state as well. If you've got positive attitude in your brain, or you're just feeling good that day, or you haven't played in a while, often is a good thing. It feels good to just play, doesn't it? I don't know.
I feel that way about gigs. Like I think because it's interesting, because there must be a parallel with the sports psychology that's involved with like a sports person having to just to get into the zone, just as they're playing sports. But I feel a similar kind of thing. Like there's a mindset that you have to tune into to have a good gig, right? Or am I making that up? Or is that just me?
Yeah, I think sometimes you can have, like, usually I find, if it starts with, you can find a parking space, or the load-in is easy, and then the next thing is you meet the sound man, he's like, yeah, how's it going, man? Do whatever you want, yeah, it's cool. Oh yeah, 2 of the bands haven't turned up today, and you're both left-handed, so just don't worry about it, just set the drums up. And then you meet the drummer and he's like, yeah, it's cool, let's show all the kit. And and then the place fills up because the other band has got loads of people coming, or whatever it might be, or loads of your mates have decided to turn up, and then it's just like everything's cool. And then usually something shit happens during the gig or whatever, but
And was
you
it
have a good
was it
sound check, or I don't know.
was it last night you had this dream?
It's happened to me a few times, and I've probably
This
played
week.
And were they your best gigs ever?
3,000 gigs. I've probably played a lot of gigs, maybe not 3,000, but I must have played at least 1,000 gigs. I reckon that's probably about right.
But I mean,
And
that's a very
I can
precarious.
name probably 5 where it's been just amazing.
I would say that that's a very precarious way to kind of undertake a gig because you're completely reliant in that situation on external factors, right?
Yeah, but when you get that feeling, and well, you always are anyway with a gig, right? You're always dependent on external factors, but I don't know. Sometimes everything just aligns, and you're just like, you can play really freely.
I suppose so. That is one of the aspects. I suppose, yeah. There's no reason why it shouldn't be dependent on external factors. That's the point of doing a gig. Otherwise, you play songs in your house, whereas a lot more control. But you want those external factors because the external factors are usually always an audience, right? And it's usually always the energy that's going on in a performance. I don't know. Like, that's interesting. I'd like to know what your best gigs were.
That's a difficult question, actually. None of them stand out to me more than the other. I don't know, in a memorable way. I've had good gigs. I can name gigs where you're like where the sound on stage was amazing, and that has only happened. And when now I know what amazing sound is on stage. So I played a show. What is it called? It's at Butlins for the Madness Weekender thing, and with the clan group that we did, and we played a show on Friday. Everyone got trashed on Saturday and whatever, and then I think it was the Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon we played this slot on the main stage thing, and we had, because we were with Clive, we had all of the Madness crew were doing our sound, and it was one of those ones where all of the kit was ferried around on carts and stuff, and they brought all of the kit to the side of the stage. Then this guy was like, I'll help you set up the drum kit. I was like, okay, cool, fine. And so he was setting it all up right, and I was like, wow, this is cool. And then this guy came over to him. He's like, what kind of mix do you want in your monitor? And I was like, just a bit of everything really. I like to feel like I'm in the crowd, if ideally, because it was a big stage and big 2 wedges, like they have on the big stages. And so I was like, yeah, just a bit kind of like front of house really. He was like, okay, cool, that's fine. And then we did the sound check, and during the sound check the guy was walking around with the iPad, whatever, and he came over and he was listening in, he kind of mixed it, and then I was just like, wow, everything is just like come alive a bit. And he was like, you want it a little bit up? Yeah, a little bit up. I was like, yeah, cool. It was like I was out front, and I was just like, shit, this is what, because obviously the equipment was bang on. It was the main band's kit, so whatever, it's going to be the top-notch stuff, but just the attention that we got as well, and the fact that they cared and that they had the kit to back up that care. I remember that gig we played really, really well, and it just felt really good. I think we probably played to 2,000 people, but in a 10,000 space, so it felt quite empty, but it was amazing, just because everything, like the reassurance you get on a big stage with a really good rig as a drummer, is because you can get really lost on a big stage as a drummer. You don't hear anything, you don't feel anything, but that was outstanding sound. I was just didn't even have to like protect my ears because he had it down low, but it was really just such a solid rig. That's the best sound on stage I've ever had, and I'm sure I ever will. Because I think I'm also my worst enemy with on-sound stage, because I'm like, more of this, more, and then you end up with everything too loud, and then you're like, oh fuck, actually turn everything down. I think they know that anyway, and they
classic drummer.
But it's because
It's because you
Yeah,
play
you
loud.
can't also instruct. You have to learn to drum and go, like drum with one hand and do all this like hand signal stuff. Whereas, you can walk around if you've got a guitar or if you're a singer. Anyway, yeah.
What about you, Dali?
Yeah, what's yours, Beth? What's your best? What are we after? What facts are we after?
No, this is it.
Dali? Is it your
I'm
best gig?
Yeah, let's without any kind of influence. Just tell us what your best gig was and why it was the best.
I do remember very well. It's a funny thing though, because I have two, and they are totally different to each other. So one of them was actually when I auditioned for you guys, sort of, and then I had to drive.
And then he went to the gig.
And then afterwards,
I had to drive to this gig. I had to actually drive to Mill Hill, pick up a PA, load the car.
I remember that.
It was frost. There was frost on the street, and my ABS wasn't working.
I remember that night because I remember feeling for you.
I was, and then from that place I drove down to Ealing Broadway to do this gig, and I was totally like, when I arrived there, I was already knackered. I was out, and then the drummer didn't turn up. So everything was basically wrong, and we spoke to this manager, and he said, "Hey, go on, just do the gig." So it was 2 guitars and bass, me on bass. And it was the best gig ever. I don't know why. The feeling that the crowd, the people loved it. It felt really good. And then I had to drive the PA back home. But after all that madness, it was actually one of the best gigs in a small place. The other one was years ago. It was totally different because I played in Prague. It was this gig. In the evening, they had around 100,000 people watching. I was with a support band. I played with this girl singer, and we were on at around 4 or 5 in the afternoon. We maybe had 20,000 people in front of us. And it was the same place where the Rolling Stones played the day before. I mean, sorry, the year, 1 year before this. It was the same place in Prague, open space. It was where the revolution took place as well, back in 1989. So I played there, and then it wasn't the actual gig, but it was the sound check, because I saw this, huge place. You can actually fit probably 250,000 people there if you wanted to. And I was there, and this sound guy just talking to me through the monitor, saying, give me something on guitar. But I couldn't even see him. I don't know. He was too far. So I thought I better strum. I was on guitar then. So I just put my chorus and I strummed I played the opening to Purple Rain by Prince.
Yes.
But because there were no people there yet.
You did.
It was in the morning. I crashed my car the day before that as well, so I was a bit shaky. But I strummed, I did this opening part, and the sound came back from that space like with a big delay, like an echo. And it was this incredible, there was no audience yet, but it was this incredible feeling that I've never experienced before that or after that. I think it was to do with the open space and the way the sound returned through the massive speakers from somewhere, I don't know, back from the woods or some houses miles away. And it was the best sound I've ever heard on stage as well. But yeah, like I said, I mean, but some of the small gigs can be, it also depends on who you play with. If the lineup is good, if you've got 4 really cool bands who are mates and who play similar stuff to you, then you can have a laugh. If it's not like that, if it feels like a competition, then it's quite crap, isn't it? But yeah, I myself played loads and loads of gigs as well. So, but these were kind of those that I remember actually.
Yeah, sweet.
I think it's almost a shame when you play too many gigs, isn't it? When you fit too many in one time, it becomes a bit of a not a bore, but laborious.
I'd rather have that than what is happening at the moment.
Yes, of course. That goes without saying. But I think, back when times were normal, and I don't know, when in my early 20s or whatever, when it's just like ploughing, doing a gig, it becomes a bit of a gig by numbers, and and it spoils it a bit because you think, oh fuck, I've got to listen to the support band again, but actually, or more often than not, you are the support and you've got to listen to other supports, I should say, because actually I used to hate headlining ever, but because that was the short straw for me, because you don't ever get any of the other bands' crowds, but yeah, God, I think it was probably when it was like 2008 or something like that, Prit, and we were doing gigs. I was doing gigs with all these different bands, and I was just like, became quite disenfranchised with it, and it's such a shame because now
I remember the time. I remember the time. I think it was when we were doing gigs with Zeus as a 2-piece, and I remember it being not fun for you, and therefore it was kind of like let's. And I think that's probably what naturally kind of like when we took a natural kind of hiatus on it. It was quite easy to put a pause on it 1 month all of a sudden, and then that had turned into 3, and then we weren't kind of picking the phone up to each other and saying, "Hey, we should get back out there and play a gig." So, but I know what you mean, and but then it's quite interesting because what Dali was saying from his experience, and I suppose what you're saying as well, is I don't know if I've got like a favorite gig, but all I know, I've got snapshots of reasons why I'm a musician, and they happen at gigs, and
yeah.
And I don't, like none of them sum up to that was my best gig. But like Dali was saying, like the fact that he had one of his best moments in the sound check, it's like I think it always relates to moment, like it relates to an event or a singular moment, or it certainly does with me, because I remember when, just an example, I think it was when you were telling me about how your gig, Dali, when the drummer didn't even turn up and things were going wrong, and all of a sudden this strange thing happens where you have this great gig at the back of it. And I remember when, our band in our 20s, you always have a band that was your band that you kind of put your heart into, and that was your band. So our band in my 20s was called I Own Kings, and it was kind of like, started as a 3-piece, I suppose. Like I was invited to collaborate with Johnny and Alex, and then we quite quickly assembled other bandmates, and very soon there was recording and production going on at the same time that we were trying to play a gig with this stuff that we were recording. And it was all very organic and quick, because I remember we'd produced the first thing that we did, like the boys came over to my mum's place. I mean, we must have been young. It was probably like early 20s. And because I got this new Mac and I got my new production computer, and I was like, yeah, come over, I'll record you, and like let's do something, let's knock something out. And we ended up knocking out this tune with no expectations. And it was just a mishmash of beats and sampled stuff and singing and rock, and it was what the template of the band ended up being, and we were just doing what we did, but which is always the best at the beginning, because there's no inhibitions and you've got you're not second guessing yourself, and it's always just kind of no self-consciousness in it. So we knocked this tune out and it was great, and I think it was called the New Cock Strut, and we knocked it out on the weekend.
I remember that.
You do, yeah. I'll probably play it.
I heard it. Yeah,
it's the best thing we've ever done.
Yeah.
So we knocked this thing.
Girlfriend to the Dance Floor is the best thing you ever did. So
that was pretty good.
Whatever.
So we knocked this tune out on the weekend. I think we kind of like started on the Saturday, Friday night. Maybe the boys came over 2 nights. Finished it on the Sunday evening. They went away with the CD. I burnt a CD. They went away with the CD. They played it either that night or the weekend after to a bunch of other musician friends, and one set of those musicians' friends were in seafood, who I've mentioned twice now in the same podcast, but they were going to go on XFM the weekend afterwards, because they were just doing like a takeover thing where they were just kind of doing like Desert Island Discs, kind of playing records for ages. And they were like, oh, we'll try and play this. So it literally within the space of 2 weeks, we produced this track. And then in 2 weeks later, it got played on XFM. And we were really boosted from it. We were like, yeah, we should do more. Everyone loves us. We're going to be fucking famous. This is easy. So we ended up very quickly like producing lots of material, doing lots of recording. It was a hodgepodge of various different styles. We got like Matt involved in it, and Matt was like this glitchy kind of electronic producer. He was coming in doing his glitch stuff in the production. Then we were getting Paul to drum because he was the only drummer who was around. He was the flatmate of Alex and Johnny, and he was like in the drum and bass at the time. So we had this weird drum and bass drummer like playing with us.
Paul, yeah.
Paul Woodhead. Shout out to Paul Woodhead. And then then we'd very quickly assembled a crew, and then we went out to play. And I remember playing our first gig, and we went to Wales. We went to Wales to play our first gig because a friend of Matt's was in a band called Talk Show, and they're from Wales, and they were doing a show in Wales, and we were getting very serious advice from inside the band. I won't say who, but he was like, we can't play a London gig straight away. It's our first gig. We need to do a warm-up. It's like, yeah, but we got to go to fucking Wales. Like, let's just go up to Maidenhead. Like,
There's some logic there. Yeah.
So we ended up doing this trek to Wales. It was super fun. We played this show, and it was our first show, and it was fun. It was nice, and we had a load of like tech gear that some of it worked, some of it didn't, and it was kind of like, yeah, we could do this. We'll just get a London show booked in. We ended up booking a London show, and it was okay. It was cool. Like, we were still figuring out what we were doing, and I remember at that first gig, a girl called Adi was there, and she was a writer for this little blog at the time that I hadn't even heard of because I didn't even know what a blog was then. This was how long ago it was. And it was called Drowned in Sound, which obviously became a good tastemaker blog. And she came up to us after the gig, and she was like, oh yeah, I'm going to write a review of you guys. And we were like, oh cool, all right, cool. And then Alex was like, she's from Drowned in Sound. That's a big deal. And I was like, oh, really? I'd never heard of it. So we ended up getting this review. And not only that, she just became like this endorsee at Drowned in Sound for us. And she was like, I'm going to get some of the other guys to come down.
Wasn't it Sean, the guy?
So Sean Adams, who ran Drowned in Sound, I think he still is the head honcho of Drowned in Sound. He does all the social BBC Music 6 Music now. And him and a couple of other people came down, and Adi again came down to the third gig, and they all loved it as well. And literally off the back of that, it was kind of like we were buddies with them. Like, it was kind of like they were interested in us, and at this point, it was not like we'd done very little. We'd done a lot of work, like just writing songs and getting them together and just getting out there. But I think literally off the back of that was our second gig. I think our third gig, they organised for us, and they organised us a headline show at the Dublin Castle. And I think Sean actually had kind of put the word out and said, come down, see these guys. And he'd got a load of industry people to come down and see us. And some bad choices were made that night. I had like a tiger print pink sleeveless t-shirt on.
Mate,
which
that sounds fucking sick.
Sounds cool. I think it was complete polyester. So all it did was just sweat and just cling to my nipples all night. And then Matt,
I'd pay for that right now, if I'm honest.
Well, it's early. Like, Matt ended up getting very, very drunk, literally, and getting panicky at the sound check. So much so we had this really delicate rig. It wasn't like these days where you can plug a load of MIDI gear in, it all works. We had this like massive rack. I mean, it probably only had 2 machines in it, but it needed like 7 bits of outboard just to work, right? And it was all plugged in with old DIN MIDI cables and various things like that.
Oh man, hardcore. And that's external factors to the.
So we had this massive rack that was like in the corner where Matt was, like where he was kind of like triggering it all with a keyboard and stuff like that. And the sound check, the sound guy literally gave us 10 minutes. It was one of those ones.
Yeah.
And he was like, right, D-Rig, get off the stage. And for some reason, Matt just lost it, went to the back and started ripping out all the MIDI cables, which took us like months to put in. He was just in another dimension. And then by the time the gig went on,
yeah.
I think he was pretty zany. And then I remember like the sound check was happening, like the bit before you go on stage, and like we were on obviously
line check.
The line check just ahead of the gig. So and it was about 10:15, and you need to be on stage for that last slot in London because people want to get the tube home, really.
Yeah,
right? That's essentially all that's really happening. And I remember it just took like ages. And all of a sudden, my guitar wasn't working. I couldn't get any signal out of it. And I've turned around and none of the band were on stage at all because they'd all gone off to the green room just ahead of coming on. And I was just there trying to sort out rig. So it all become technical. Actually, you guys have both seen me in that situation before, right?
Yeah.
So it was just quite nasty. And I had Sean coming up to me at the front of the stage and going, "When are you on?" And he's the nicest guy ever.
It's his name as well. It's his name, isn't it, that he's put out there for you?
Yeah, exactly. And he's the sweetest guy ever, but he was actually coming up and looking pissed off and going, "What the fuck are you guys doing? Just when are you starting, And I was like, "Yeah, just a second." Like it was just, and it got to the point where Alex's mum was coming up to me and going, "What are you doing? When are you going on?" So, and then I've ended up kind of like, all of a sudden I've just pressed on something and the sounds come through my amp and I'm like, "Oh, great. Okay, I got a line check. Great. I need to go and get the fucking band because we should all be on stage." And then I've walked into the fucking green room and everyone's fucking high-fiving each other like they've just finished the gig. And I'm like, "You fucking dickheads, get on the stage." Yeah. Like we everyone's just about to go home. Let's go. And so we walked onto the stage and it was just one of those things where it was way too early. We still weren't good enough. This whole thing was way too exciting. Everything about it was just too much energy. And we played a shit gig. Sorry, I know we're supposed to be doing good gigs, but like I'm just going straight to my shit gig. But like it was just difficult. And it was, the whole thing felt like one big massive cringe. And I don't see how it couldn't have come across as a cringe to everyone else. And it was evident. Like those type of gigs. Literally, as a gig's happening, it's thinning out in swathes.
Yeah.
And the last song was literally like, it was we were asking for mercy. There was like a few people left in the crowd. I think maybe even like Sean was just kind of like nodding his head in the corner with AD and then we there was no talk of anything after that with the Drowning Sound guys because they were even talking about, Sean was talking about doing a label and doing a singles label. There was conversations about that, but that kind of all got quiet. But it was we blew it. But I think it was good because it was very early on, and I remember we all went out on the road and we went and done a gig in Wolverhampton because like Dave was like, "Oh, Seafood are playing out. We're doing a little tour. Why don't you come and jump on and do a number somewhere?" We were like, "Oh, that'd be fantastic." And I can't remember which venue they were playing in Wolverhampton, but it's a really nice kind of. It's a really nice kind of like 400 kind of venue.
Yeah. Wolverhampton Civic Hall.
I can't remember.
It was the Toilet Tour. The Toilet Tour was that, and like. Not the lead mill back room, and
it's a nice big oblong room. It's a real big oblong room. But we ended up playing that one, and it was a similar thing. We were put on. The promoter obviously conceded to a request by the main headlining act, but just did not give a fuck. And it was kind of like, yeah, guys, get on, sort of thing. And we'd done a similar thing. We got on, we weren't given any time for sound check. We got on what we thought was a sound check, but then we were informed as we're standing on stage, this is a line check. And then we were like, "Oh, shit." And literally we're taking our duffel coats off and turned around and there's 5 kids up against the barriers and it's just like, "What's going on?" It's like, "Doors are open, play." It was literally like that. And we were like, oh shit. So it was like a quick line check of everything. And then we started playing, and it was difficult. You know what it's like if you haven't done a sound check. Some things are working, some things aren't. And we're into the first song, And we used to do a lot of kind of instrument swapping as well, which was a fucking appalling idea, but we did. That was just part of the setup. And I remember this thing happened on. We had a song called "Leave the Cities," and it's in 6/8, and it does this big massive build at the end, and then there's this massive kind of rock explosion at the back of it, and we played our way through it. And the place was really filling up because obviously a lot of kids had come out and see seafood. So it was just getting all quite buzzy and stuff. And there's some people paying attention, a lot of people that are not, but a lot of noise. And we're playing this delicate song that will erupt at the back of it. And it's going to be one of the big moments in our set. And I remember we kind of this build was happening and it's quite a few bars. And all of a sudden, the explosion bit came to kick in, and it's just like bang, and then Alex's bass just cut out, right? And it cut out, it just cut out ahead of the bang. And then it was just one of those things, when everyone's going full throttle, full weight, so the rhythm section is half missing, right? And so Paul's just smashing it up, trying not to play a drum and bass lick, and then we're all kind of like. It was just one of those moments where we kind of like looking, you can see the whites in the eyes of your bandmates as they're like kind of looking around. And Alex was kind of like looking at this smoking head on this like bass cabinet and just trying to kick it and thump it as it is, going to the floor and checking if it is trying to bypass a pedal, all that kind of panic stuff that you're doing. And we've kind of cycled round in about, there's been 8 bars of this kind of very lightweight, loud drumming and guitar. And then all of a sudden we just heard this like, and you knew Alex had sorted his signal problem out. And with great restraint, we were coming up to the back of like 4 bars, and with great restraint and measure, he just kind of knew he had a signal and didn't come in, and he turned around, and we all just looked at each other. We were all looking at each other, and then Paul might have even done a little announcement, and then it was just like bang, and then we all came in together. So we'd almost suspended this big thing, and the drop inevitably ended up happening, but it happened at a complete wrong place, and it only happened through communication and a moment, and we seldom did that. So, and I remember everyone at the back of the gig was in the room at the back going, "Oh, that went so badly." And I was boosted. I was like, that's the best gig we've ever played, just because of that moment. Because
a bit of communication as well.
Just because the moment is the most important thing. Like all you want is a moment. Like that's what a gig is. If ever you think of your favorite gigs, like I can think of my favorite gigs, and there's been something very special that's happened. Mm-hmm. In the space that we're all inhabiting. It's not just there to gaze adoringly at some fucking indulgent twat on a stage. That's not the purpose of a gig. The purpose of a gig is obviously the band are the conductors of what should be an energy that everyone gets to participate in. And if it works well, there's this wonderful feedback that happens, and all of a sudden this energy it feels bigger than whatever everyone's conducting and participating in. It just feels like we're here together. They're the best bits.
Well, that's what excites me about what's to come, because we always talk about the shit bit of COVID, but actually, is it coming towards this amazing crescendo of like kicking your amp and suddenly the signal comes in, everyone gets a jab in the arm? Next summer, man, fuck, that is something to look forward to now. I genuinely believe that. Like, yes, we've had so much shit and it's been terrible. Everything's a bit of a downer right now. But the one little glimmer of hope is next summer, I think. If it is the summer, whenever it is, who cares about the time thing? But at some point, we're going to be able to go back to gigs again. And we're going to be able to play gigs. We're going to be able to go to gigs. And those first few months, I don't know, I think it's going to be like... A little bit weird, just like it was going into lockdown and staying at home. But B, how fucking exciting. You can go, oh yeah, I'm going to see a show, or I'm going to go for a meal, or like whatever it might be. That is exciting for me now. Now you can start to look at the coming out of this shit thing. That's the exciting bit, right? We can play a gig. Mental. How cool is that going to be? People are going to want to put you on. We're going to have a lot to say as well musically, because we're going to have this bent up whatever it is and be able to play a gig. And then people are just going to... Everyone's going to need it, but everyone's going to want to be there at the same time. So I think the best gigs are about to come along. Like, people haven't been able to play a show. People haven't had any money. You know, it's fucking terrible. But imagine that part when people start to get money again, people start to be able to play again, people start to be creative again and hug. Fucking hell, man. It's going to be like when you've taken 3 pills and they're all duds, and then you take another one later. Wow! And then, it's a real one. It's all happening. That's going to be really exciting.
Yeah,
Apart from the drugs, you know.
No, drugs as well. If they're involved, then so be it. I think that's a wonderful, optimistic way to look at it. And I think, it's not blindly optimistic. It's very possible. I think those of us who are discerning enough to have felt something missing now will have really had our appreciation kind of senses rekindled, you know, like I think I will, you know.
We all know there's a big thing missing, right? Not just the fact that everything's a bit hard life-wise, but the creative industry is absolutely on its knees because it's trying all these things that are clearly quite fucking daggy, to use an Australian term. But do you know what I mean? Everyone's like, fuck, I guess we'll do this thing online. I mean, we're all talking over Teams, doing a podcast, when really what we should be doing is be down the studio playing our instruments, you know. We're doing this, and that's cool because it's some kind of creative input, right? But I don't know. But we all know that that's coming. It's exciting. It's exciting. We've got to think about that, because otherwise we'll just fucking curl up and become Meatloaf, whatever Meatloaf's doing.
I like Meatloaf.
Yeah.
Here we go again. Yeah.
He's an absolute...
Sorry.
I mean, what's wrong with...
he's an absolute
what's
Meatloaf, Thatch out.
What's the song again?
I would do
everything for love, but I won't do that in
Isn't it?
brackets.
anything for love, right? Not everything. You wouldn't do everything for love. You'd do anything.
True, that's true, yeah.
But not that. Whatever that is.
No way. Yeah. How many was that? 14 weeks? Was it Bryan Adams or him that had the longest?
Yeah, I was gonna say everything I do for you, but that's a different one, isn't it?
Yeah. The longest time at the number 1 spot. I'd just like to say.
I can guarantee Roland doesn't like either of those.
No, but he's not here, is he? So we can talk about mainstream.
He won't even watch this.
Yeah, I do like Meatloaf. I mean, do you know why? Do you know what my favorite thing of Meatloaf is him playing Eddie in Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah. That's amazing. But that's not Meatloaf.
That is Meatloaf.
If you know what I mean.
That is pure Meatloaf.
But that isn't Meatloaf the musician.
No,
you know what I mean?
that is Meatloaf at his most musicianish. Like, he gets the best song of the musical as well. He gets Hot Patootie, Bless My Soul. Have you heard that?
Yeah. No. It's amazing. Yeah.
Fucking amazing.
I've been a few times to Rocky Horror dressed up and all that
have
stuff.
you?
I love it. Yeah, of course. Got to do it.
That song is amazing. It's like, whatever happened to Saturday night? The feeling's right. Like, it's he's so good at phonetics. Like, he just gets all these, like, there's really fast syllables going on through that whole verse, and his rhythm's great. Anyone who's any great singer's got great rhythm. Like, his rhythm's just fantastic, and then especially where they go. It's the thing I love about the rock. I love all Rocky Horror songs, like, they're fucking genius. But that one in particular, the register just lifts up on the chorus, like it's genuine heightened rock and roll shit, which is just really kind of blood pumping rock and roll shit. And his voice for that is just, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it actually reminded me of nothing to do with it, but another one of my favorite gigs I saw in Vienna years ago, Live in Color. I remember this feeling. I saw them many times. Well, I saw them maybe 5 times in different countries, actually.
Amazing.
But this one in Vienna was somehow special. I don't know. There was this small-ish venue, dark,
What tour was it?
I can't remember even
Stain?
which. No, it was later than Stain. It was actually around the time when they released the one with
Biscuits or something.
when the Twin Towers went down and they had this song about it, about flying or something. It was called Parking Lot. I don't know. It was that album. I can't remember what it's called now. Quickly, but no, it wasn't. It wasn't that long ago. It was 2000 something. 2003, 2002, something like that. And I remember the rhythm, because you were talking about rhythm. But when it comes to Living Colour, because people, probably quite a lot of people just hear them as a heavy band. But us, or me, I don't. It's so much more than just a heavy band. It was this almost magical connection. The whole rhythm was lifted up. Like, I thought I was like 10 centimeters off the floor, to be honest, with them. It was all a little bit laid back behind the beat, but every single one of them together flying in this, but again with those heavy, those heavy sounds. And it was like that throughout the whole gig. It was really magical. It was much more than just a rock and roll show, actually. I remember going back home from Vienna thinking, oh, this is totally amazing. But the one in particular was somehow really good. And funnily enough, I remember before the gig, Vernon Reid, the guitarist, we were there when he was sound checking for some reason. They let us in, because they don't play like Living Colour. They are not, they don't need bouncers, right, or anything like that. They are normal people. You can talk to them. So we were in, and he was sound checking. And I remember he didn't look very happy, and he said he had this, because he's using quite a big rig, right, with loads of stereo things plugged in, and then he was standing in front of these 2 huge monitors, and he said to the sound guy one sentence, and the sentence was, "Both sides are wrong." So he was just really not happy,
Just unhappy.
and then it was one of the best gigs I've ever heard and seen in my life. So that was really cool. The Living Colour one, actually.
That's really amazing.
Amazing, man. It's good to hear you say that, actually. Well, both Prit and I have a massive affinity. That was my first ever show that I ever saw on the Stain tour. It was in 93. 31st of March, 1993. Yeah, my first ever show. And it was fucking incredible. Like, the whole thing was incredible. They were my favourite band, still are one of my favourite bands. And Prit and I managed to go and see them in...
Look it up, Greg, because we never know where it is. Is that a little pub in
Milton
Milton
Keynes.
Keynes?
Oh, really?
Yeah. But it was a cool place, man. It was just a good
super
afternoon.
nice.
It was a really good... And Prit and I have talked about Living Colour a lot. We've talked about bands of that time a lot. But Living Colour are very special to me.
I feel the same way about Living Colour, and Vernon Reid is one of my favourite guitarists, and he, it's not just because of all of his rock gymnastics. Like, I think he's an amazing rhythm player. I love the way he plays his guitar, because I just can't even figure out why his hand does, his plectrum hand, he plays it upstroke, doesn't he? It literally looks like this when he's playing, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. And then, but when he plays leads, it's almost like he skips in and out of rhythm, like he's in rhythm, but then all of a sudden he just goes off and he's jazz as fuck. And it's not even necessarily the notes that excite me about his playing. It's kind of like just feeling like he's just dancing any fucking way he wants to. That's the thing that excites me about the way he plays. I think he's a wonderful guitarist. But it's interesting when you told me about that Living Colour story, because I remember it just for some reason put into my mind when I went and I was lucky enough to see D'Angelo when he toured Voodoo. And that...
Shut up. Did you really?
Yeah.
Because that was one of my favourite shows when I saw him at Brixton. But that was maybe 2010.
That was when he came back. Well, I was lucky. I was lucky to be turned on to
Where'd you see
Voodoo in time. Brixton Academy. Yes.
By the way, just before we go deep into Voodoo,
yeah,
it was called the Crawford Arms in Milton Keynes.
Yeah,
Great
that's
venue.
it.
Really, really cool venue.
really good. Put us on, Crawford Arms.
Yeah.
If
you're open.
if you're watching, So D'Angelo had recorded the album with a load of superstars, right? And well, just great musicians because he's a great musician as well, and he got them on tour with him. So, and shamefully, I don't know who they are, but like
He had Pino, didn't he?
He had Pino Palladino on bass, and he had Q-Tip was not Q-Tip. What's his name? Questlove. Questlove was playing the drums.
Sorry. Yeah.
And the band was spectacular. I think it was like a 9-piece band. I remember there was a guy whose one job was he played a octopad, and he just played a ride cymbal and a finger snap on every single song. He just had to stand and go.
Yeah, but amazing though.
He was amazing.
When it's bang on with Questlove as well.
Jesus Christ!
Shut up. Questlove played later, didn't he? When we saw him, and Pino.
Yeah, I think they both were at that gig, weren't they? But the first time round was very special because the reason why it was special was because Voodoo was a great album. It was quite obviously a great album at the time it came out because you could hear it and go, oh wow, this is amazing. And then when he came on tour, we were expecting nothing else other than him sitting at the Rhodes, doing Voodoo, having a great bunch of musicians, and it feeling like a big jazz club thing. And the first track of the album's, what's it called? Devil's Pie, right? Which I don't know if you've heard, but it was produced by DJ Premier, and it's just a stone cold hip hop like production. And he does all this Prince harmony stuff all over it, and it's amazing. And where he's layered his track so many times, and he just does all these elegant kind of like sevenths and like high octaves and things like that, and then curves them around, and they all follow each other. It's just really beautiful stuff that Prince obviously laid out as a template, but it's executed so well all over that album. So we didn't know what to expect other than we just knew we were going to be seeing a really musical show. And I remember they came out right at the beginning, and the album actually starts with this kind of strange voodoo kind of droney kind of thing, and it fades in at the beginning of the album. And they faded this in at Brixton Academy, and the sound guy must have been on steroids because it was so fucking loud and bass heavy. The whole place felt like it was vibrating. And these 9 musicians had walked out in these kind of weird monk's cloaks, so you couldn't even see them. So all of a sudden it was like, oh, we're getting a theatrical performance here. You know, we're not just getting a bunch of musos coming on stage. And they're all walking around with these kind of like hooded cloaks and kind of bumping into each other and walking around with this just backlit light. And the whole place felt kind of voodoo-y. It was kind of like, oh, we're going with a Black Magic Theatre vibe. And then the finger snap guy starts up, so the ride and the snap, ding, ding, ta, ding, 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 ta, and there's that hip hop thing's not happening, and they just do this like production version of Devil's Pie, like literally with the 3 backing singers, D'Angelo and everyone else in kind of in their positions with their monk's cloaks on, and just the finger snap guy, and they're just doing it to a rhythm, and I think he sung like 2.5 verses. Of like 2 verses, 2 choruses, and it's kind of like, oh, this is how they're doing the song. And I remember thinking, wow, this is really bold just to choose to do it like that anyway. And it was wonderful, like all the harmonies, they'd really worked on all that gliding stuff that he does on the record, and it sounded amazing. And then all of a sudden there was just like a hornblat on that kind of coming out of that 3rd verse, ba ba da ba ba da ba, and the whole band kicked off. Their monk's cloaks went off. House lights came up, and then all of a sudden there was just it was a proper hip hop jam, and the crowd were doing this, and we were like 10 minutes into the gig, and the whole place had just like turned into steam and sweat, and it was rocking, and this gig was rocking all the way through, and everything just had this massive live energy to it, and it was so exciting, and song after song, it was just spectacular, and there was such good musicianship all of a sudden a production of a song would just break every now and again, and something musical would happen that is being improvised in the moment. So this whole thing was just beautiful and engaging and just powerful. And it was kind of like, whoa, we're seeing like a superstar here. And he was a superstar. And then he got put in jail and then disappeared for many years.
He did. What was he put in jail for?
I don't know. You're probably going to Google it, and it's going to be something that's going to make us go off him.
There was stuff. Yeah, there was stuff to do with prosies, but I don't know. I don't think that was then. I think it was maybe afterwards.
Is it kind of acceptable prosy stuff, or is it kind of Me Too vibes?
I'd imagine it's Me Too vibes. Let's have a look.
If you get put in jail, I mean, it's got to be along those lines, right? Don't do it, Greg. If it's really bad.
But Prit, I keep thinking about your guitar because so it's a bullet, right?
Yeah.
And you had it done in silver. That makes it a silver bullet.
Oh, it does.
So you can kill vampires. Or, I don't know. You can kill whatever.
I'm going to write that on my this guitar kills vampires.
Have you been to the Silver Bullet in Finsbury Park? Have you played there? Just opposite the train station. I played there many times actually. Yeah, it's a pub. Okay. It's actually it's a bus station in front of the tube station and train station, Finsbury Park. And it's called Silver Bullet.
I've heard of it. I've heard of the venue. We might have been trying to get a gig there at some point.
We were meant to play the Rage Against the Machine after party there after they played Finsbury Park. But not that they would turn up, but there was an after party. But I don't think it happened for some reason. It didn't. But it was, I remember after the gig they did in Finsbury Park, actually. Yeah. Cool
that would have been fun.
Yeah.
Did you have to play Rage Against the Machine covers?
No. It was just someone who knew someone. So that kind of a thing. But
okay.
We were heavy enough. So.
Nice. I mean, what were the first bands that you got into? Were they heavy bands?
No, not at all. Well, like when I was 15, you mean?
Yeah, when you started playing?
No, it was very clean. It was very much, we were writing instrumental songs, and it seemed like, I think we were influenced mostly by the 60s, if not the 50s actually. But then it changed very quickly, because this was in the 90s. So, grunge was around us heavily, influencing everyone. But then it changed. And then for some reason, there were many bands after that I was involved with. I don't think there was a genre which I wouldn't play, actually. I've probably played all of them.
But that's the best way to be, right? Because then you can use all those influences for when you do make music in whatever style you're making at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't regret anything. I understand. It must be really cool to be in one band with your schoolmates, from the age of 14 until you all die, like U2 or something. I don't know. It must be really cool.
There must be something amazing.
But at the same time, I mean,
boring.
Yeah. I was gonna say that after you release your 12th album, then it's really nice to meet other people and do to the extent where I used to be in this funk band and I had to move so I wouldn't be hit by the trombone. I mean, that's not the greatest experience, I know, but it's fun. It's fun that I remember. Then this rhythm guitar and trying not to get killed by the trombone, which is cool. I was behind him and and anyway, and also what I really like is being on stage with like one singer, for example, which is totally, this kind of naked thing where there's nowhere to hide. You've got one guitar or maybe one guitar, one bass. That's it. And every note is, sort of important. I like it. I like it. Maybe because that comes from my classical background as well. I'm not sure. But
what is your classical background?
Well, classical guitar.
Yeah.
I studied, yeah. Well, it's different, it's not rock and roll, but it makes you it makes you think about every single note. When you're playing some 20th century modern classical piece, 4 or 5 pages of it, and you spend 3-4 months learning it, and then you play it in front of people who know every single note because it's your teachers and or whatever, it's a competition or your exams or something, and you need to, it's quite nerve-wracking, but that's really cool. I'm glad I did it. So.
Do you still get nervous?
No.
You never get nervous playing a gig?
Only good nervous. Like I get nervous if I don't play a gig, to be honest. I mean that sort of adrenaline rush I consider really pleasant now. I didn't maybe when I was 12, maybe I thought I was, maybe it wasn't that pleasant, but now it's something I miss actually. I think it, if anything then it makes me play better, to be honest, than at home. It's just that extra thingy, which I actually honestly really miss this a lot. I think it's a part of the thing I'm talking about with my favorite gigs, where it cannot happen at a rehearsal or at home. It has to be with that extra, with that tiny bit of pressure, being in front of people and trying your best. I think that's a big part of it for me. Actually.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're just making me think of another moment I really enjoyed when I had a gig once, and it's probably similar to what Greg's talking about. That thing that where you feel good and then good things happen. Because I remember being at a gig once where that was when Johnny and I just used to go around with, I'd play guitar and there was a drum machine and he'd sing a bit and sometimes he'd strap on a guitar. So we were really doing a stripped down version. But I remember we had the drum machine going and then this section I play a guitar solo. I just have 16 bars for a guitar solo or something. And we were playing in some pub in Camden. And I remember really enjoying the sound check actually, because the guy told me to get my line check going, and then he was like, "Keep it going." And then and I'm always very polite with the sound engineer. I'm always very sensitive to them and just trying to make sure I'm not stepping on their toes and just trying to make sure I'm trying to help them get it right. So I was being very conservative about playing for him. He was just like, "Yeah, no, it's all right." And there was 2 dudes sitting in the audience, in the bar, just kind of watching the sound check, but just having a pint. And they were all quite clearly musicians. And then I just started playing some like blues, like fast blues on while I had a really good crunch sound on. And they were both just jumping up and like whooping. I mean, this was a sound check and it was really fun, like it. And then they came up and they were like, "Yeah, you're a great guy and we should jam one day. Yeah, see you later." And never saw them again in my life. But then I remember that during the gig, when we were on stage, there is something that happens, that little adrenaline thing that you're talking about. And for me, sometimes I've been at my most clear-minded when I'm on stage. And I remember the moment happened on for my guitar solo bit where I just show off and I'm as wanky as I like, just so it's theatrical, because it was just 2 of us on stage. And I just done that thing where I hit that first note, and then when you turn to the right angle and all of a sudden the feedback started, like I was just in the right line with my amp, the amount of noise coming through the monitor and my position on the stage. And I just got this feedback loop started immediately on my first note. And I just had the presence of mind to not disrupt it. And so I ended up playing like this 16-bar solo of just a single note feedback line. And that's all it was. And I remember as soon as that finished and we got back into the groove, the whole fucking crowd were like, "Yeah!" Like it was like the best solo I've ever done. Like, and all I did was just like hold the note. But because I think what must have happened was I just had the clarity to recognize this was the right thing and then just be guided by this note. And it must have been, for me, it was hypnotic enough to be kind of mesmerized by it. And I can only, maybe I'm romantically fictionalizing it, but I like to think that perhaps the audience who were paying attention might have seen that in that moment as well and recognized that was just the right thing to do.
They gave you good feedback.
That's it.
They did. one feedback leads to another.
It's
Terrible.
it's the silver bullet, man. It's just you can't. Did you have the silver bullet?
It was the silver bullet.